Hello, Ken. Thanks for tuning back in. This is my post-game analysis of the Northwestern Wildcat versus Michigan State Spartans game to start the 2021 season. And before I get into it too much, let me just say like, subscribe, comment, and hit that notification bell down below. Your likes and your comments help me determine what's going over well and what I should keep doing. But with that out of the way, let me just start with saying this. All aboard! We're getting on the hype train. The Michigan State Spartans look fantastic in this game. Now, my friends and family and those that I talk to about football know that, or at least I think have an idea that I'm usually a voice of reason. I temper expectations and try not to take too much away from any one game in particular, especially games early on in the season. But man, it is hard not to get excited for the Spartans this year. They looked good. They looked crisp. They played clean. And it was much better than I expected, to be quite honest. I said in my initial video before the game that I didn't know really what to expect. Because there was a lot of new faces on both sides of the ball. You never know how that's all going to play out. But my goodness, the Michigan State Spartans looked much, much better than the Northwestern Wildcats. I think we really saw Northwestern, the toll that Northwestern's losses took on them. They lost quite a few players, especially on the defensive side of the ball, to the NFL. And that certainly reared its ugly head in the opener. But a great way for the Michigan State Spartans to start the season, getting a conference win like that against a team that's traditionally been a bit tough for the Spartans. It's usually a pretty tough matchup. They trade a lot of blows. They like to go back and forth, just depending on the season. But to go on the road and get that win is it's huge. It's a great way to start the season. Sets the tempo, sets the tone. And a really, really well done. Okay, so what did I like about the Spartans in this game? They were clean. What I mean by that is they executed their plays properly. They did not commit a lot of penalties. They just went out and did what they were supposed to do, and they looked good doing it. I did not see a lot of things that were overly worrisome. It looked like they really knew the playbook. And they did a good job of staying disciplined, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They didn't get tricked. They stayed home. They trusted their assignments. And I think the biggest thing was, both on the offensive line and defense as a unit, where I think it tends to be a bigger issue than perhaps in other areas, is that they trusted the person next to them to do their job. And if you have that trust as the defensive unit as a whole, and as the offensive line, then it allows each individual to play better. You get into a lot of trouble if you have one guy trying to make up for somebody else's assignment who they're afraid might blow their assignment, so they're trying to do too much. I didn't see any of that from the Spartans, and that's a very good sign. Especially with a lot of new faces, you never know how well they're going to mesh together, how the chemistry is going to play out. And honestly, I thought it looked good. Like I said, I didn't really see anything that stood out as a negative. They played really well together as a unit, especially for their first game together. What else did I like? Kenneth Walker. My gosh, is he the real deal or what? What a monster day. Very good vision. His balance is phenomenal. He doesn't often go down with first contact. Lot to like with that kid. Phenomenal running back. And I also like that they mixed in some of the other guys, but not to a degree that I felt like Walker had a hard time getting into his rhythm. I wish they would have gone with Walker a little bit more early on in the game, and then started to sprinkle the other guys in a little bit later. I think Walker was out for a little bit too long. That's just being nitpicky from a personal preference. Obviously in this game it didn't hurt him at all. Walker still played phenomenal even when he came back in later in the game, just to spell some of the other guys a little bit. So just a little nitpicky on my part. I hope against tougher competition later on in the season that they let Walker really just hammer the other team early and often, and then sprinkle in the other backs about halfway through the second quarter, and a little bit more often in the third and fourth quarter. But based on what I saw, I would not give any of the other backs more than 5 to 7 carries per game. Walker should be getting the majority. I think he proved he's clearly the best back on this team, and he is a force to be reckoned with, especially if the offensive line is going to block that well and do their assignments. Then it was just it's a really good-looking running game.
From the 49-yard line,
Peyton Thorne got the starting job. I thought it would be Russo, but Peyton Thorne, his experience within the system, I think, kind of won out for him. He was familiar with what Mel Tucker wants to run, having been there last year and starting a few games. So they decided to go with Peyton Thorne. I'm not really sure what to say about him because Northwestern's defense was so bad. I mean, Walker's talent is clear and obvious. Peyton Thorne, he felt like and I'm not trying to knock the kid. I think he played a great game. He did everything he needed to do. I just didn't see a lot of playmaker out of him. I will expand on this a little bit more in a minute, but I did not see a lot of like big-time playmaker out of him. He felt like a game manager to me, and that's fine. Especially against Northwestern, he didn't have to do a lot. The running game was so explosive and so dynamic, they basically just didn't ask Peyton Thorne to do much, and that's fine. That's a good thing, I think. But how will that play out in the long term? I'm not really sure. I don't really know what to take away from this because I felt like Northwestern was so bad. And what I mean, I'm not trying to, when I say that, I'm not trying to take away from Michigan State. Like I said to start this, I think that Michigan State looked awesome. They looked phenomenal, especially for the first game of the year. They looked crisp, they looked tight, all good there. But along with that, you have to, I think, recognize the fact that Northwestern shot themselves in the foot over and over and over again in this game. They really killed themselves. To me, it looked and felt like Northwestern hurt themselves more than anything Michigan State was doing to them in particular. A lot of mistakes on their end, penalties, turnovers, just missed assignments. The defense kept sucking down and allowing the Michigan State running backs to bounce it to the outside. That's not anything Michigan State did. To clarify, it's not Michigan State wasn't doing anything to make those guys suck down into the box like that instead of holding the perimeter. It's just young players making bad mistakes, and so the running backs for Michigan State were very good at seeing that and then taking advantage of it. But against a more disciplined defense, do things play out a little differently? Probably. So it's hard to. I'm going to temper expectations a little bit. As good as I think Michigan State looked, and I do think that your expectations for them this season should have gone up based on this game. It's game number 1. Most of your biggest jump in what you're going to see out of this team is going to come between this previous game and the next one. Week 1 to week 2 is always where your biggest jump is because now you have something on film. Now you can go into the film room and you can show your guys in game what you did wrong, what needs to be tightened up, what needs to be done better, and what you're going to focus on this year on the things that did work, and to praise those guys for things that went right. So that's why generally from week 1 to week 2 you see the biggest jump in how players perform. Because you have tangible evidence now. You have them in a game situation on film, playing together as a unit, and seeing where things went right and where things went wrong. But to temper expectations a little bit, like I said, I think Northwestern hurt themselves more than it was any one thing in particular that Michigan State was doing overall. I mean, Michigan State did a lot of good things with their play calling. I loved Michigan State's play calling, both offensively and defensively. They did a good job of keeping Northwestern off balance. They did a good job of not allowing Northwestern to really get a read on what Michigan State was going to do on any one particular play. I thought the defense was varied enough in their coverages and looks to confuse Hunter Johnson. Hunter Johnson looked rattled all game. He was skittish in the pocket. He never really settled in, and I got to give credit to Michigan State defense on that. They were getting pressure on him. They dialed up blitzes to keep him honest, keep him on his toes, keep him from getting comfortable in the pocket, and he played poorly. He just, you know, I think we saw why Hunter Johnson lost his starting job last year. He's just not the it guy. I didn't see anything about Hunter Johnson out of this game that makes me feel good. If I was a Northwestern fan, that would make me feel good about him being the quarterback moving forward. He never settled in. Even at times when he had a clean pocket and time to throw the ball, he just looked skittish. He never really settled in, and I do give Michigan State some credit on that. It's not just that Hunter Johnson's a skittish quarterback. Michigan State was doing a lot of different things to confuse him and make him less confident throughout the course of the game. But some of it, too, was like right out the gate, Hunter Johnson just didn't feel settled to me. I don't know if it was nerves or what it was. He just felt jittery before anything even happened, before Michigan State could even start to confuse him. So he just started that way, and it never got better. So some credit to Michigan State's defense for that, but some of it, too, is on Hunter Johnson and the Northwestern offense just not feeling like a good team. They repeatedly shot themselves in the foot. So, yes. Do I feel good about the Michigan State Spartans where they're at right now? Absolutely, and you should, too. They looked like a strong unit. And I think I would say their floor this year, based on the way they looked in game number 1, middle of the Big Ten. Floor. The ceiling, probably 3rd or 4th in the East Division. And, I mean, if they were in the West Division, I feel like they would probably finish 1st or 2nd. I mean, even Wisconsin in their game against Penn State didn't look like world beaters. Iowa looked pretty strong, but yeah, I would say floor for Michigan State is middle of the Big Ten. And I feel like that's saying something because I think a lot of people had that pegged as their ceiling. But my goodness, after game 1 and they came out and looked so good, so confident, and the chemistry was there already, you've got to expect that is only going to get better the more games that they play with each other. So I think they boosted their floor a little bit, and I think they raised their ceiling a bit too. You know, if things break their way this season, sometimes you get a little bit of good luck. You know, maybe they are pushing for 3rd or even 2nd in the East Division and towards the top of the Big Ten. Who knows? You know, that's why they play the games. Anything can happen, but yeah, I'm saying, you know what? Let's just jump on the hype train. Let's just roll with it. I sometimes I get tired of being the voice for a reason. I just want to enjoy the good times when we got them. You know what I mean? So, yeah. I'm being nitpicky with the little things I've pointed out about Michigan State, but really, other than not knowing how good Northwestern could be this year, and honestly, I think their ceiling is middle of the West Division, and that's pretty bad. I do not expect them to compete for the West Division by any stretch of the imagination. At the bottom of the West, it'll probably be Nebraska, Illinois, and Northwestern, based on what I've seen so far. It's just not good. They have a lot to fix. And that's not to say that they can't. I do like Pat Fitzgerald. I think he's a good coach, but with a school like Northwestern, when you lose guys to the NFL, you don't always have the clear and obvious 5-star talent to come in and replace the guys that were lost. This is not an Alabama, this is not a Clemson, this is not an Ohio State. So sometimes there is just a drop-off, and sometimes it takes a while for those guys to really settle into their starting role. So hopefully for Northwestern, they will continue to improve as the year goes on, and I'm wrong about where their ceiling is, but based on that first game, I did not see a lot of dynamic playmakers. They looked like a hot mess. They made a lot of mistakes. They made penalties. They just weren't meshing as a unit. So they got a lot of work to do. And the exact opposite is true for Michigan State, which I was not expecting coming into this game, to be quite honest. Northwestern and Pat Fitzgerald usually has his team pretty buttoned up. They usually stay home on their assignments. They're usually a disciplined team. They don't commit a lot of penalties.
First down, 10 to go.
And it was actually Michigan State that really showed that through this time. Like, they were all of those things that I thought Northwestern would be was Michigan State this game, and that's why it wasn't even close from the start. I mean, Michigan State just never let up, had their foot on their throat the whole time, and that's a good sign. That's a good sign. Temper expectations a little bit, because I do think Northwestern is a bad team, but The flip side of that is Michigan State played really, really well, and they played really tight football. And if they can continue to do that moving forward, then I think that you could be in for a surprise season. In that, I think they will do better than a lot of people expected to start the year. So something to keep an eye on, I would say, is Peyton Thorne. And as the competition gets a little tougher, see how he responds. I do like what I saw out of him in this game, and I have no problem with a game manager. You can win a lot of games with those guys. You don't always have to have a world beater. And the bright side for him is I didn't even touch on Reed and Naylor, who I think could be a monster duo this year. I think both of those guys are extremely talented. They got speed. They got good hands. I know Naylor had a quiet game, but you see flashes of it, and sometimes Peyton Thorne didn't always find Naylor when he was open, or he didn't always hit him when he could have. You know, sometimes stuff like that just happens. So a bit of a quiet game for Naylor, but don't read into that too much. Sometimes guys just have a quiet game. You do see the talent there on the field, so that could be a dynamic duo, and that's something that could help Peyton Thorne maybe prove me wrong a little bit, is because he's got those great targets, and really all he has to do is get them the football, and if he can do that, Michigan State's in for a good year. So that's going to be my take on this one. I will do another pregame coming up in a couple days here and get that out before the Michigan State Spartans play again. But to reiterate, I loved what I saw out of the Michigan State Spartans. They were much cleaner and crisper, and the chemistry was already starting to develop. All good signs for them moving forward this year. So let's get on the hype train. Come on, join me. Jump on board. Let's get rolling. So that'll wrap this one. Remember, all love, all the time. Peace.